So welcome everyone to this very special closing ceremony of the Building Bridges Summit 2024. Now we've heard this week, financing for nature has been very much front and center and a core pillar of the program this week. But we still underestimate the immense value of nature and biodiversity. The truth is that these natural systems are deeply interconnected, and they're also indispensable. And yet the structures that we depend on to tackle these issues at the global level still treat these issues of climate change, biodiversity, and land degradation in isolation. And they are ignoring just how interwoven these issues really are. Now, we heard at the beginning of this week, just a few days ago, Johan Rockström gave us a planetary health check. So the urgency is there, but we've also got an incredible opportunity. And as we look towards next year, there's COP30 in Brazil. We're on the road to Belém, and this is our chance to help raise awareness, raise the ambition, but also inspire action around biodiversity. Now, biodiversity is not just an environmental issue, it is fundamental to our economies, our communities, and the very fabric of life on Earth. But what we need is a fresh perspective, a new narrative for biodiversity, one that helps shine a light on just the systemic role that it can play in helping shape a sustainable future. And we're going to start that journey here together today on the road to Belém. At the Villa Institute, we are thrilled to be working together with Open Planet Studios on an exciting new project. And we're going to share more of that with you shortly. But I'm also thrilled to introduce you to a good friend and also incredible filmmaker, director, who has inspired millions around the world to see our natural world in a whole new light. So Colin Buttfield, who's here with us today, he's worked on award-winning documentaries such as Our Planet. You know, of course, Sir David Attenborough, and you've probably been sitting in your homes at some point watching these incredible documentaries from your sitting rooms. But that alone, Our Planet, has actually reached over 570 million people since it was first released. Wow. So that deserves a clap. Thank you. So it just shows the power of storytelling, and this is a unique moment for us to seize this opportunity together. And here to tell us more about what we're up to is Colin Buttfield. Colin, please join me.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's been interesting. I've been here for the last couple of days, and on a few occasions, I've been wandering around, coming out of sessions, and run into somebody I knew from somewhere who's gone, "Why are you here?" And I think they meant it in a nice way. Pleased to see me. Why are you here? But actually, sort of that surprise. What is somebody who tells stories for a living doing at a conference, essentially building bridges between finance and nature? And it's sort of a fair question, but actually, when you look at it, look at the change, the types of things people have been talking about over the last few days, restoring nature at a landscape level, blue carbon, restoring our seas, restoring our coastal communities, how you bring nature into a boardroom, define it as an asset class. What we're actually talking about underneath those are what Johan said right at the beginning of this week, to echo Emma, which is we're at a situation where nature is so unstable, so degraded, that it's affecting the very fabric of our economies, the very fabric of our societies, the stability of the lives and livelihoods we depend on. So conversely, we're talking about an opportunity to change that. But of course, what that means is changing the way we think about almost everything, the way we organize our societies, what we trade in, how we approach it, how we define what we should be doing day to day. And the changes we make in different communities and locations are places where real people live, that are complex, they're not easy tick boxes. They're just as sort of messy and integrated as nature itself, where people live, where decisions are made, where the debates are had, where there are trade-offs between the different things we do. And at the heart of that, if we really want to change something over a long period of time at this level of scale, you're talking about a societal scale, great change, greater than anything we've done in modern human history. That's such enormous, enormous change. And that requires a new narrative. And if you don't sort of believe that narrative change is fundamental to this, think of any big societal change over the last few decades, whether it's the change in same-sex relationships, debates around immigration, recent elections, my country deciding to leave the European Union. These weren't decisions that were made based on rigorous intellectual evaluation. They're often things that are made from narratives, from stories, what story best resonates with you. So I think if we're going to have big change in the way we value nature, the way we approach the natural world, it also requires a new narrative. And we have the most incredible opportunity over the next year or so, where we have the ability for the world to be looking at how you bring together the issues of climate, nature, and humanity, and look at it in a totally different way. So as storytellers, we found that quite exciting. How do you do that? Where do you begin? What do you look for in change? And our first approach of it was to start to look at particularly those societies like my own and like ones many of you I'm sure are from, where we've become increasingly disconnected from nature. We don't think about the value of nature in every moment and every decision, every aspect of our lives. And how do you bring that back, but in a way that's really compelling and really human at the center of it? So we got some of the greatest natural world filmmakers, people that have spent their lives filming nature and telling documentaries to hundreds of millions of people, but actually turn those lenses on us, on humanity, to tell stories of different people around the world in different ways and how they connect to nature. And so for the first time, I want to show a clip from this, a little trailer we've just put together. It's a big feature film that's going to be coming out at the end of next year, just ahead of Belém. And this is the first time we're going to be able to show it. And unfortunately, I've got to start with an apology, because for the online audience, I know there's a lot of people watching online. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to stream this online, so we've got a clip from something else to show you guys. But in a few months, you'll be able to see this. Sorry. You should have been here. It's brilliant in the room. You should have been here. But So really apologies for that, but you will get to see it. For everybody in the room, this is the first glimpse at our new film. Hope you like it. Can you play the first clip, please? Thanks so much. We've got another little sneak from that in a few minutes' time. But the idea of this film, that's obviously a bit of a tease. The whole point is to make it look interesting without really giving anything away. But the idea of the film is to tell 6 different overlapping narratives from different people around the world, and how nature plays a huge part in different aspects of their lives, bringing together this sort of sense of the importance of nature to all of us as humanity and how we can change that story. And to sort of dive a little further into that, we're lucky to have one of our main characters in this film. You caught a little glimpse of her up on the screen. You've probably seen her a couple of times already this week here at Building Bridges. Please welcome Shea Bastida. So, Shea, you've obviously been here for a few days, and we'll come back to the film in a second, because you play an incredibly important role in the film, but you've also played an important role at this conference. And I'm just wondering, you've heard this sort of narrative around nature building. What's your sense over the last few days about how how we're talking about nature and maybe where we need to go with it a little bit.
Yeah, hello everyone. Hi again. Thank you for being here in this closing, and congratulations for this. I'm really excited to be a part of this. It's an honor. I think what you shared at the beginning really resonated with me about, I mean, you really made the case of why we need stories. And as I shared with you over these days, for indigenous communities, stories is the vein of our existence, how we transfer knowledge. And we know creation stories that can date back thousands of years. So stories are really kind of our river, our DNA. And I think in reality, all the narratives that we're told is stories overlapping. And I think for a long time in the past decades, the story, the overlapping story of what is success, of what is development. I mean, many of you might be here because you were told the story that a career in finance is what made you successful, right? And I was told that looking after nature is what was my purpose to be fulfilled. So the stories that we're told from when we're super young inform the way that we see the world. And I think even a lot of what I've heard in this room, some of it is like circular economy, some of it might be how do we make nature profitable so that it makes sense to save nature. And lots of those ideas, I think, can be so expanded to, for example, the fact that there is no waste in nature, so circular economy is biomimicry. Those type of things are, I think, what is going to get us to the other side. And something that I wanted to share as well was a lot of times when we talk about indigenous principles and indigenous communities, two things happen. Number one is either it's totally set aside, as it had been for many, many centuries, or it's romanticized, right? And it's also this idea that if an indigenous person or community comes to you and tells you, hey, you should care about us, I think it's sometimes the feeling of us saying we should go back in time to live how we live. And that's not necessarily what we're saying, because we know that situations have changed. So many people live in cities nowadays. What we're really saying is, what can the world look like? What new story can we create together, where the principles that have allowed indigenous peoples to thrive with nature are embedded into every fabric of our society? That is the new story that we're going to be telling together. So that's why I'm excited to be part of this, because I think we have a real opportunity to create a story that we're proud of and that can survive for the next thousands of years.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. The first time I met you was at COP in Dubai, which is probably neither our natural habitats. And one of the things I was sort of immediately impressed by was the way you seem to effortlessly span worlds. You seem to be able to be just as home talking about and embedded in nature as you are talking in policy forums like this, and I saw you speak at COP. And I just wonder what aspects of the sort of storytelling tradition that you took from your culture and you bring so well into this, do you think we can learn from, that we can learn in order to bring that nature narrative back into all of the discussions that we're having going forward over the next year? What's the sort of nugget of learning that you've seen?
I think one of the most important things I can share with you is that for us, nature is not that tree, that ecosystem over there, that animal. Nature is a practice. It's kind of how people say that hope is a verb, which sounds a little cheesy sometimes. But nature, honestly, it's a practice. You cannot expect a connection to nature if you don't go to nature, if you don't go to the forest, if you don't go to the river, if you're not there fully. If you don't think about the life cycle of what you're putting inside of your body every time you eat. That is nature. And I was having a conversation with Jennifer. I don't know if Jennifer, right there. I was having a conversation with Jennifer earlier around what it really meant when we talk about deepening consciousness in humanity. And that conversation is something that I've thought about a lot throughout my life, because my goal is not to convince everybody here to have a connection with nature. The goal is that for those of us who have had that connection, how do we deepen it? Because that is how we increase our collective consciousness, which, if you ask me, that is the goal of, at least my goal, but of course of indigenous communities. How do we increase our collective consciousness to understand that we are one with nature, that we really are inseparable. And so that is, I think, 2 teachings that I can bring to you today is, 1, nature is a practice. Number 2, it is such a personal relationship to increase that consciousness that we can share with our communities, and that's the goal. And obviously, I mean, I've talked about reciprocity. If we receive so much, we need to give back. I've talked about the 7 generations principle, intergenerational leadership, long-term thinking. I mean, who here remembers when the world was going to end because the Mayan calendar said so in 2012? I mean, it was the biggest thing ever, right? And what was really the story there was the end of a calendar cycle. And that cycle ended, in reality, 2013 May. And the new cycle of the calendar starts in May of 2026. So the Mayans see this period of time between 2013 and 2026 as a period of transition between 2 calendars. And it means that this period of transition is difficult, there's transformation, and all of us are in the midst of that transformation. My question, what I'm trying to answer is, how do we start 2026 with transformation undergone so that we can start a new cycle of the calendar connected, as many of us, as deep as possible?
Thank you, Shir. And it's what's really interesting in the way we've been kindly, Shir's let us pop up and follow her for much of the last year in different places. And what the whole point in taking these 6 different stories, they're people from the American Midwest, someone from China, Shir's story, all overlapping, is you realize this presence and absence of nature fundamentally impacting different parts of society. So what I want to do now is something that seemed like a really brilliant idea a couple of days ago, and I'm now slightly nervous. So Shir hasn't actually seen any of the footage of her. And we normally the process with filmmaking is you go and film for a year or so and it goes all over the world, and then you sit down in a dark edit room for 3 months and put it together into a story. Knowing this was going to happen, we put together a couple of minutes of the filming we've done with Shir, and I thought we'd show it to you for the first time on stage, and I'm now slightly nervous, because if this doesn't go well, we're going to have a very frosty remaining conversation. But again, apologies for the online audience, we're going to have to show you something else, but you'll get to see this in a few months' time. But if we could play the second clip, please. I think you'll agree she's amazing. And I mean, there's 2 things I wanted to ask about that, apart from how did it feel to see yourself on a giant screen? But I'll leave that for a second. I mean, talk us through a little bit about the sort of the tale we're trying to tell here, and the different aspects of how we bring, or you bring your life together, and we sort of follow you on this.
So, I mean, you saw the Day of the Dead, which is a really popular Mexican celebration. For us, the end of life is something to be celebrated. Obviously, we grieve, but it gives us a chance to remember the history of our people. And my grandma recently passed away, which you saw her picture, and my grandfather as well, actually, about like October 11th, so now 2 months. And so it was hard for me to open my home to be shown at this scale. But the message is that for us, nature is culture. And if we lose nature, we lose our culture. And if we want nature to be part of all of our lives, it needs to be part of the way we do everything, the way we culturally act. And I don't think you can tell a full story about why it makes sense for me to be here or in New York without seeing the background. And you saw my dad as well. And the last piece of it is wonder. I mean, there's never been a time in my life that I haven't been, felt immense wonder by everything that I see in nature. And that is, I mean, I haven't seen the other 5 storylines, of course. I've only seen this. And what I want you to take away from it is all of us all of us have these stories, we just maybe haven't found them. And if you have, it's time to share it. It's time for all of us to be nature's ambassadors, which also sounds a little cheesy. We have to find different ways of saying these things. But it felt, I mean, I'm a little, I don't know if you see that I flushed a bit, but it makes me nervous, but it makes me excited. Because you can see that what you see in animated movies actually happens in real life. I mean, you saw Coco, and that's how we celebrate, our elders and the people who have passed. And it's so integral to the way that we are. I mean, when you bury somebody, we weave tule and make a whole figure out of it. And tule is a long grass that grows in my lagoon. So we weave it, and that goes with the person. And we have practices like this almost in every stage of life. So I think that's the spirit that I want you to feel when you see this.
Thank you, and then thank you so much for sharing all this with us. I think I've got one last point I'd like to make, and then just a final thought from you, Shea. I mean, one of the things is, I think, as filmmakers, as storytellers, you can't kid yourself that one film changes the world. Of course it doesn't. So the only way we're ever going to shift all of this and really get to a stage where we're truly valuing nature, where it's embedded in all of our decisions, from financial to emotional to cultural decisions, is to really change the narrative. And that means bringing it into the boardroom. That means how we speak to each other. That means bringing it into the negotiations at Belém. There's a real chance to readdress that. We're at a moment of crisis, and you need an opportunity to come through that. Which is certainly our real hope out of doing this. But I just wanted to, last word to you, Shea. What's your hope over the next year on the road to Belém? What do you think might realistically kickstart over the next year?
Something that you just said about bringing nature into the boardroom, I think also bringing the boardroom to nature. So if all of us did that, if all of us were practicing nature, I think that's a big shift. But the second thing is, the reason why we're so big on biodiversity for this COP in Belém is because the story of Brazil is the Amazon. And the story of the Amazon is the lung of the planet. And even though we know that the oceans give us 80% of our oxygen, it's still the story that it's forests and trees. So we are basically tapping into all of these stories that already exist to launch the fact that we need to bring together biodiversity with climate. Because we have the biodiversity COP, we have the climate COP, and it's so bizarre that they're not united. So that's the story that we're trying to bring. The coming together in global negotiations, biodiversity, climate, and indigenous communities and people, and the fact that when we're writing the collective story, all of those are part of the puzzle. So thank you, Colin, so much, and thank you all again for being here and sharing your time with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Shir.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you both for inspiring us, but also hopefully sort of building some elements of the narrative and the story you're going to tell when you go back to your work, to your homes, to your communities as well. Something we talk about a lot is at the Vila Institute is just looking at the power of narrative helps us shift away from this sense of anxiety to help create and sense make what's going on so that we can turn that anxiety into ambition and start to build real agency. And I also want to thank, I mean, this is the start of something, and of course, with and together with Building Bridges and this entire community, we really want to leverage this incredible storytelling narrative moment together and look forward to looking at creative ways we can tap into this going forward. I am now and have the pleasure of inviting up Dan Esty to take on the next part of this conversation, still on the road to Belém and helping us look at our entire sort of system, whether it be the economic system, the trade system, of course, and connecting the dots as we go on the road and continue on this road to Belém. Dan Esty, please join me on stage. Thank you.
Emma, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to have seen that film. It's going to be, I think, a high-impact element of the coming year. But we now are at the end of a week of exciting activities, interesting panels, important ideas, and really a vibrant conversation. And I want to bring to the stage our closing panel, including our special chair, who I invite to the lectern. But let's have our panel come up as well. So we are at the end of a busy week. We've covered a lot of ground. We've looked at the prospect of a sustainable future from a number of directions, with special emphasis on what the finance world can do. We've come to see the need, as we just heard, for more integration between issues, climate change, the need for focus on nature, on biodiversity. And we do recognize that there's a number of elements that are going to need to work together if we are going to see the coming year deliver at the end of the year at COP30 in Brazil, the kind of outcomes that I think people are hoping for. And we're going to start this closing conversation with our special chair, Michael Baldinger, who is with UBS and is the Chief Sustainability Officer, who's been thinking about these issues of sustainability, and particularly the finance dimension, for years. And we invite you to help set the stage for this closing conversation. Michael.
Thank you very much, Dan. And I must say, I've been around the conferences. I think I've never spoken at the closing if so many people still hang around. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. And it really is a great, great privilege today to be here. And thank you so much to give me the chance to speak to all of you. And the conversations we've had this week is, the exchange of ideas, of new innovation, and also being critical about certain topics. That really is what this is all about, really building, a more sustainable, connected future together, because that is really needed, and we need more of that. So just let me reflect, and I know I have some experts here at the panel who are much deeper in the topic than I am on the COPs, but if we just look at COP29, and I know we all expected more, but despite that, I would like to say we made some significant progress as well. For example, the financing for developing countries. A new goal was set, triple from 100 to 300 billion by 2035, and we have a total of 1.3 trillion funding from both public and private sector by 2035. I have not heard a lot about it, but the carbon markets made great strides too. Finally, we have operational rules for Article 6, outlining how countries can trade carbon credits. And this has really been a sticking point for a long, long time, actually since COP21. So I think this is a big win and a good consensus which we achieved at COP29. Also, announcements on nature and deforestation represent small but welcome positive steps. And And Brazil updated its voluntary climate goals to include reducing deforestation. And a critical step for global climate, hails from a country that hosts 60% of the Amazon rainforest. However, there were also significant gaps, as we all know, and I think about them in two main areas. The first is how to implement the new financing goals. We still have no clear roadmap on how these funds will be mobilized. The second is on phasing out fossil fuels. Like the financial goals, we have targets, all of us, I think, but there's still no clear path ahead. Other areas of contention persist too. Many countries feel the agreed finance is just not enough, and particularly for developing countries, who need the most finance, obviously, to reduce emissions and adapt to climate change. Nature also remains underrepresented in discussions, no doubt about it, and growing the bioeconomy will be key, providing important solutions such as biofuels, nature-based solutions, as well as limiting nature destruction. And this is why Brazil is making nature focus COP30. We'll hear more about it in Bella in a minute. So while there were some positive steps, the COP29 was only a start. Each country will need to step up and do more, and we know that. Switzerland is already a leader in decarbonization. We set that out in a white paper we just published a couple of days ago, that Switzerland has one of the lowest carbon intensities of any economies in the world. But as our report makes clear as well, there is still much left to do for Switzerland on a global basis, but also in Switzerland itself. So COP30 calls for doubling down on areas where we, as world leading financial center, can help drive agreement. For me, the opportunity lies in addressing the key sticking point coming out of COP29, the availability of transition finance. And estimates, we all know that, all quoted in trillions, and it's clear much, if not most, of this capital will come from the private sector. Two things will be key to building out effective transition finance: transparency and collaboration. On transparency, financial institutions depend on disclosure, which UBS has always supported. And this means we need better definition, taxonomies, particularly on what counts as transition finance. And that's not an easy thing to do. Switzerland already leads on creating credible, transparent, useful disclosures. You don't have to look far, for example, with the Swiss Climate Score, which has been a great tool to create the transparency. Also TCFD, TNFD, where we all heavily, obviously, using those frameworks, or the net zero data public utility. So I think we're in the midst of it and made great progress in Switzerland as well. Also in collaboration, Switzerland can and should continue facilitating dialogue, and I think Building Bridges is a fantastic example here, how powerful an event like this is to do exactly that here in Switzerland. It is the type of cross-market collaboration that is key to solving complex global issues like climate change, for example. And I like to use climate tech as an example. Often these are brand new technologies which have never been scaled before. Naturally, this calls for experimentation and new approaches, also failures on the way, including how we finance their scaling journey, and that is really key. How do we get scale in all these technologies? And if you don't have that, I really fear that COP29's financing goals will remain just that, an aspiration, a goal, but no reality. But finance alone won't solve the problem. Real change requires action across all sectors. Disclosure are one part of this, but it's not everything. A key hurdle is slow economy transition. And capital flows will go where they can make returns. Capital markets are very efficient, very practical how they think. And this is not always in support of transition today. That business case to attract the capital risk-return profiles. And ignoring these facts mean ignoring the difficult trade-offs that realizing net zero and which it involves. To name a few, reducing the exposure of financial institutions to carbon-intensive industries today can simply raise the cost of capital for those firms, which the free market take care of it. But that makes it harder for them to transition. These financial frictions can then generate larger systematic financial risks and shocks, like sudden drops in valuation and stranded assets. Striking the right balance between setting rules and providing incentives is absolutely essential, I believe. But it's hard. But we need to make the economics of transition make sense. Only from there we will transition finance flow at scale and speed and in an orderly fashion without costly trade-offs for society. And the financial sector can help to support the transition through finance, investment products, and research and advisory, but we have limited ability to influence clients' transition abilities or speed. This really depends on the broader enabling environment, and I see three things as important here: clear climate policy targets, strong but fair carbon pricing, and the right fiscal and financial incentives. Let me be clear, transitioning the global economy to a lower carbon one is a monumental task, but it's achievable with collective actions and the right balance of carrots and sticks. This may become more difficult in a world, actually, moving towards greater trade barriers and frictions, as we all witnessed over this year for sure. And governments, regulators, businesses, and consumers all need to work in the same direction to make this happen. So with that, I hope I did not go over the famous 6 minutes, which I learned a lot about this week, but back to you then, Dan. Thank you so much.
Michael, thank you very much. Michael, you've given us a number of the things we need to think about on the road to this COP30 in Brazil next year. What we need to do, you've laid out a good bit of, how we need to do it, and the fact that we do need to build bridges to be more integrated across nature and climate change, across the elements of environmental sustainability and social sustainability. We do need sticks and carrots. We do need rules and incentives. We do need investment and mechanisms for delivering the goods, the services, the technologies, trade. So there's a lot we can talk about, and I am very pleased to bring into the conversation Ambassador Felix Wörthli, who is Switzerland's chief climate change negotiator. We have him just off the plane from Busan in South Korea and the plastics negotiation, and had previously just been in Baku at COP29. So thank you for coming with us when you should be at home getting some rest and recovering from spanning the globe's time zones. But it is a challenging moment globally. These negotiations had some challenges that maybe you can reflect on a little bit with us. But I'm also eager to hear what you see as the road to COP29. What's on the road? How are we going to make it work? And how are we, in the spirit of this closing session, going to ignite global action to address a warming planet that threatens both climate change and, frankly, loss of the biodiversity that we had so beautifully demonstrated in the prior part of this closing session? So, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Just to say that the movie before started some reflection from my side. No, when we have the climate COP, what we're trying, we bring 190 countries together to come to some conclusion what we can do in this fora to tackle the challenge of climate change. That means also 190 different cultures, backgrounds, economic interests, and also we create some of our own culture in this climate COP. We have those codes, how we talk to each other, we have those elements, and it's also a whole process how we learn to trust each other, to work jointly. And just to say, I think sometimes we also be lost in this bubble. So such kind of these events like today is so helpful to get this kind of interactions with the outside world, have this interaction, help us also to think further beyond what we see. So it's very much appreciated, the opportunity to be here. Also just about the point of storytelling, each COP has its own story. So we had the COP28 in Dubai, big headlines, transitioning away from fossil fuels, a very strong presidency, they welcomed us very warmly. We have Belém, we have heard it next year, it's in the Amazonas, that was a choice made by Brazil to also tell the story. And this time we were in Baku, Azerbaijan. It was on a quite short notice that we have decided to meet there. They only had 11 months to prepare. And it was a bit about the finance COP. But let me talk about 3 elements that I take away from this COP that will also be part of the road to Belém. First one was also mentioned by the previous speaker. I think a success was that we agreed on Article 6, the market mechanisms under the Paris Agreement. I hope very much that this market mechanism will stimulate ambition, enhance investments, and particularly for innovative technologies like negative emission technologies, where we have to do much more. The second one that made perhaps the biggest headlines this time is about the finance. And I think also it is always it's a story behind. No, they have worked for 3 years, our experts, to prepare this decision, and at the very end, a lot of things have been decided in the 72 last hours of the COP. And I think for me, the important message there, we have one is the global investment target, 1.3 billion that we have to mobilize up to 2035 annually for investments in developing countries. I think this figure shows, first of all, the magnitude of the tasks. Secondly, we have different elements there, how we can support that. So also recognition of we have tools to support that. And we have kind of a task force, we have this road to Belém that will work on what this process can contribute to mobilize these needed funds. Then we have the support goal. These are the 300 billions. So we had up to this COP, or up to 2025, we had a target of 100 billions. Now it's 300 billion, so 3 times more. I think that's a positive signal. It's now a collective goal. So not only developed countries have to contribute, it's all countries, while developed countries taking the lead. And for me also as Switzerland, it was important to have a realistic goal that is ambitious but achievable. But we know the geopolitical situation. We have seen perhaps the US might leave the Paris Agreement. So in this circumstance, it's a very positive signal, I think. And then I would say the one point I missed the most, and where I have a lot of hope for the next COP that we can get stronger there, is about the mitigation part. All countries, we are going to submit next year what we call NDCs. These are kind of national climate goals, where we show how much we will reduce our emissions between 2030 and 2035. And we should submit them by the 10th of February. Some will be a bit late, but before the COP we'll have these NDCs together, and we have an analysis of that to see if with those NDCs implemented, is 1.5 still in reach or not. I think that will be the big message from the coming COP. We will see those NDCs, we will inform how we intend to do it. They should be aligned with 1.5. We have to subject to the science, so the reduction target comes from IPCC, but also quite a lot of freedom how countries present them. And I have seen some Brazil have presented already, they show real investment plans to also communicate with investment community how it can be done. Switzerland, we intend to show how we do the energy transformation, also to enable discussions about that. And very honestly, the Paris Agreement, we have not foreseen how to react if the NDCs are not strong enough. So that will be the big task of this coming COP, that we have the process that pushes us, each other, as a positive peer pressure, to be ambitious enough in our NDCs to keep 1.5 in reach, to assess the situation at the COP in Belém, and to react to it.
Well, thank you very much. That gives us a lot to come back into. And I'm going to offer a spoiler alert with regard to whether these nationally determined contributions to climate change action, these national climate action plans, are going to add up to a sufficient amount. And the answer, for all of you who don't know, is they will not be sufficient. But that is why we're here, is to really dig in and ask what can be done. And I'm going to come back to you on that. But first, I want to bring into the conversation Naoko Ishii. She is from the University of Tokyo's Center for Global Commons. She's the former CEO of the Global Environment Facility. She is also one of the planetary guardians that we heard from earlier in the week as Johan Rockström laid out for us the planetary health picture, which is, Johan made clear, not so good. He has been tracking the planetary boundaries that are a gauge of the critical Earth systems that support us. And as you know, 6 of 9 of these critical Earth systems are at risk of being transgressed, of really breaking down and not delivering the kind of balanced Earth that we need for sustained life on Earth and for human thriving. But Naoko, you've been thinking about this for many years and from many different perspectives. And you've been part of the conversation across the week. And I wanted to just ask you to think from your perspective as a planetary guardian, as someone who's thought about the flow of capital to the needs of a sustainable future. What's your impression? What struck you positively, negatively? And what is the path you see forward to COP30?
Actually, I was very happy that this 4 days conference started with the science message that Johan presented so clearly, so evidently, that our current economic and social system is in the collision course with natural system, that our way of economy and society has really eaten up the foundation of our own prosperity or even civilization. So it's time for us to change our system if we are to continue to prosper within the planetary boundaries. So for the last 4 days, we have had a lot of conversation about how we can really change our course. So a lot of conversation about carbon neutrality, how to move on to this nature positive, and also even the circularity, how we can change our very linear system towards much more regenerative system. But still, those conversations are kind of siloed, and the previous speakers actually mentioned that it's time to integrate those siloed conversations into the one kind of system. So COP30 presents a wonderful opportunity for us to think about how we can integrate those different conversations into one economic system. Again, that the planetary boundaries tell us that our current economic system really doesn't do the justice to the natural system, and we really need to change that one. So from that point of view, the COP30 Brazilian presidency and the G20 presents this beautiful concept, this bioeconomy, also that ecological transition. These are the opportunity for us to integrate these, separate the principle into the one economic system. So that's a kind of, to me, that is the way, the road to COP30, and we need to really seize this as an opportunity. But maybe you ask, what are the action levers to realize this beautiful, powerful concept into the reality? So for the last 4 days, I have actually had a quite good conversation here in this setting, and I just want to pick up maybe 2 things. That the one action lever is actually the policy and regulation. It's actually really good to hear that the private sector is asking that we need much stronger the policy and regulatory levers so that green premium become much more lucrative thing. As of today, that a lot of green stuff is not profitable. So that there are a lot of good conversations, beautiful initiatives here and there, that it requires a lot of effort to make it monetized. So that the question, actually the plea from this conversation is, can we really come together to demand that an instrument to monetize those avoided emission, avoided waste, so that the green become a profitable business. So that is actually one conversation I pick up as a way forward. And this is also I hear from Baku, that it's the first time for the last few years, private sector come together to demand the policy, the regulatory people. Now, how can we really set up the rule more harmonized, standardized way, and also create the incentive and the disincentive to do the right thing? So to me, the Baku is quite positive because this is a kind of new conversation. Private sector become much more serious on how to deliver the past commitment. So, but the second thing, second action lever is actually you, the financial sector, together with the private, regulatory people. And you know that we have 100 trillion world economy, and how this 100 trillion world economy and the finance is really behind it. How can we really change this 100 trillion economy to become much more nature positive, resilient, and circularity? And this is actually our opportunity and your opportunity to come up with collectively to see that the leadership, to create the movement. I have been hearing a lot of great things happening in this room, but they are still kind of fragmented all over the world. So how we can really work together collectively to create a leadership, the platform to move towards this direction for the transitional, ecological transition, bioeconomy, whatever we name it. It's a new paradigm of that economic and social system. One last word, she said that your ambition is that to bring the nature on the boardroom. Actually, I do also have an initiative that to put the nature on the balance sheet. We had a lot of conversation, is this a right thing or wrong thing? That originally I scared her because it may sound like commoditize the nature, but then the intention is that how we can really shift the current economic system so that we can really respect the true value of the nature at the boardroom, but also financial system, so that we can really realize this paradigm shift.
Thank you, Naoko. And I think what you saw here across the week was a recognition that we do need business to step up. Andre Hoffman's discussion of the new nature of business and his book of the same name was a good example of that. And he is with you in thinking we need to bring nature on the balance sheet. And what I really think we've seen over the course of the week, and you're highlighting it for us, is that we do need to change the trajectory of our society, and that the critical piece of that society is the business world. But it also is that we need direction set by a political world. And Mr. Ambassador, I want to come back to you, because there was a shadow cast across the gathering in Baku about the sense that political headwinds were building, and frankly, that the geostrategic situation was challenging. And if anything, since we've come home from Baku, countries seem to be collapsing left and right, or at least governments do. And this adds to the difficulty of bringing the world together, which is what you and your colleagues, the rest of the climate negotiators, are meant to do. What's your sense of that path to the conversation in Brazil at the end of next year? And do you have a sense of what's going to need to be done to ensure we get the political direction that everyone else will be guided by?
I think also was a very important message we had a lot in Baku is that the transformation has started, and whatever happens will not be stopped. And renewable energies, we have heard 85% of the new capacities in energy 2023 were renewable energies. All those things, they will not stop. The question is, how fast will it go? It will slow down in certain regions, it will be not fast enough, but it's not changing. I think that is very important. Secondly, there was no backtracking from the decision in Dubai. We were not able to reinforce it, but I would have loved very much. That was not possible, but it's no backtracking. The message is we are on course, we have to continue that. That has not been challenged. For sure, we all see back home, and we always say in climate change, you don't have the perfect student. No, we all are learning and struggling sometimes. But we all have learned certain ways. When you talk about how to reduce fossil fuel subsidies, that's a challenge for everybody. What we have not been able yet to create is the space to discuss this really among countries to move forward much faster. And I think there we are also lacking a bit, what there we didn't manage enough in Baku this time. So I believe what also Brazil, as a presidency, they had, as mentioned before, they had the G20 presidency this year, and they have worked a lot in this direction, how to mobilize finance, how to mobilize investments. For example, they have brought together Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Environment, central banks to address certain key questions. No, we know that some countries have struggled to attract investments because of the environment, the economic environment. What can be done in this regard, for example? And I think there, the discussion has matured a lot over the last years, and also we as negotiators, we have learned a lot. And I think really that there, I expect major achievements and progress in the next time in Belém. We have this one element of the Paris Agreement objectives is alignment of financial flows. And that will have a decision next year in Belém. And I think there is a huge potential to make progress. We have talked about carbon pricing, has been mentioned, fossil fuel subsidies has been mentioned, but also how to create an enabling environment for investments. I think there we can do a lot. I think also what we hear from the business community, I just remember we had the International Chamber of Commerce reached out to us in all the countries before us with certain key recommendations for negotiations. Exactly, it was a lot about we need global rules, we need global approaches to move forward.
So we're going to probably stop you there and try a different microphone, but let me just switch gears for a moment while we're getting you set to continue. It does strike me that another of the lessons from the week here is that a lot of parties need to step up and really lift their game and contribute to what's required to deliver the action that Naoko is telling us we need. And you've highlighted a number of them. I've come from 2 years working down the street at the World Trade Organization, and they may be able to step up and drive the conversation on subsidies. And I would argue that you've got a dynamic leader there who's just been given a new mandate in the person of Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. And she's very interested in not only ensuring that we crack down harder on the damaging subsidies like fossil fuel subsidies, but frankly, fishing subsidies that lead to overcapacity, production-based agriculture subsidies, and at the same time creating more space for the sustainability enhancing subsidies, clean energy subsidies, and what we need to get to a sustainable future. So it does seem we've got at least some of the partners ready to contribute so it doesn't all fall to our climate negotiators. But Naoko, I want to come back to you for just a moment if I can, and that is to say one of the other themes that I saw emerging here in really a much more powerful way this year than ever before is the recognition that a just transition needs to really bring the global south into the conversation. And we had a very strong representation from Africa, our perhaps most dynamic economic continent, young, growing, and entrepreneurial, energetic, and I thought all of that was projected here in the conversation. But I know you've been thinking about this as well. So just share, if you would, a little bit about your reflections on this question of how we make it a just transition, ensure that it's about people as well as the environment.
No, it's a great observation, great point. Actually, I'm very happy to see that the people came here from quite a diverse region, because it's absolutely important to make sure that we are designing or co-creating is really just to reflect those diverse voices. But I want to say maybe two things that to make sure our pathway to Berlin and beyond is really just. That number one is that how to really reflect this value of, let's say, natural capital. Because if we really do the right thing to account for the true value of natural capital, and it really requires a comprehensive change of the accounting system and the market system. But who will be the beneficiary of that new system? It's predominantly the people, the indigenous people, local communities, smallholder farmers, forest people who are safeguarding that natural capital, that by now almost for free. So that one of the reasons that why I'm so passionate to put the true value of the natural capital into the economic decision making is we need a system to safeguard that those guardians, to reward that effort made by guardians. So that's one. But the second thing is that when we think about the transition finance, which was also discussed, we kind of ignore, or maybe we may have not put enough thought about the region's transition pathway is very different from region to region. The African transition pathway is different. Asian transition pathway is different, and the current economic, the financial system really don't pay much attention to it, so that the taxonomy is mostly driven what created here in this part of the world, but it's not necessarily most effective or useful for other regions. So I'm really pushing us, that the entire world, that let's also participate in that international rule making to really that reflect those voices from all over the world. So,
thank you very much. I'm going to ask Ambassador Verdely to give us a couple more thoughts, but while he is talking, I'd love to have the microphones run out across the room, and if you want one, please signal to one of the folks that carry the numbered paddles that I'll be looking for as I call on people to offer some further questions. So, Mr. Ambassador, you've given us a picture of some of the ways forward, and I think you've given us a sense that there is opportunities, and I think there are also challenges. And I'm wondering whether Michael didn't give us a signal in his opening special chair's guidance about a special role Switzerland might play. Because I have to tell you, it's my perspective that traditional leadership of these international conversations may not be available from the countries that have historically provided it. And I did think Michael was very good about highlighting some of Switzerland's leadership posture. And I'm wondering whether you think Switzerland and others that might historically have seen themselves as supporting but not leading the charge are going to have to step up their game and perhaps take a leadership role.
Thank you. So if you ask me, we already have a leadership role in the process. We do our best. I think one thing what we have learned from the Swiss side, now often Switzerland is portrayed as the bridge builder, building bridges. But we always say in negotiations, in environment, we don't always have to build the bridges, we have to push also. I think we have to defend our interest, and what we do as Switzerland, we make our contributions, but we know, for example, that the G20, 80% of the GDP, 80% of emissions, we absolutely need the big emitters to make their contributions. So for us, it is our role to push there also, to bring them on board, to have ambitious NDCs. We very much work with our partners on that, that's for sure key. I think also that we have a quite unique democratic process is interesting in this regard. The fact that we had adopted a new carbon law, our clear climate innovation law, that has been approved by the people, shows that you need a large coalition. You are able to have a large coalition for climate action. We have able to put in our law that we will be net zero by 2050, approved by the people. We have certain element steps we have agreed there also. I think also our finance sector has a particular role to play, that is for sure. Also part of this climate change and innovation law is certain obligations for the for the finance sector to contribute to that. They do already a lot. We have this what we call the PACTA. I think we have been discussed also over the last days, where there's a lot of reporting already done to also show how the climate sector, the finance sector, I always confuse climate and finance, sorry for that. Finance sector is really contributing, aligning the financial flows to those goals of the Paris Agreement. So from the Swiss side, I think we are very much committed. We are also part of negotiations track. We are leading a negotiation group together with other countries. We are chairing this group, and we for sure are willing and we foresee to play our role to push the agenda forward and to have that we have in particular now next year 1.5 aligned NDCs.
So I'm glad to hear that you're ready to push and not just build bridges, but really lead the way, because it may require some new parties to open the space from the path forward. So let's see if we've got questions out here. Do we have a hand raised or a paddle ready to go? All right, here we go. We've got in the third row and then maybe in the sixth row beyond. So, sir, please let us know who you are, just for a little bit of context.
Yeah, my name is Mike O'Callaghan from Global Vision Foundation.
Wonderful.
I just want to really support your proposal for the potential role of Switzerland as a global leader. You know, in American football and politics, they talk about the offense and the defense strategy. And I have a feeling that in Swiss politics, in relation to the EU, for example, there's been always a defensive policy. Oh, we don't want them, you know, we're complaining about what other people want to impose regulations on us in Switzerland. But I think that Switzerland is the best example of direct democracy, possibly apart from what's happening in Taiwan. But it's an example for the world, and Geneva is by far the most important city at the intersection of global trade and finance and politics and civil society and so on. And I think that not only could Switzerland be really a catalyst for making the transition happen, but also Geneva it has the potential to be the cradle of a new renaissance.
Well, thank you for that comment. That's extremely helpful. We've got a question coming behind, but I do want to say, coming from a country that's now in a period of reflection on democracy, there are some important lessons that have come out of this week. Direct democracy, how you engage the public, how you ensure the public is with you as you move ambitious agendas forward. I do feel like there's some learning to be had. And I'm also very clear on the need, which our prior part of the closing session demonstrated, that we need to connect to people on an emotional as well as rational basis. And I think we've got, again, all of us, but particularly some of us more than others, have lessons to learn. So it's a joy to have had that reflected in the conversation all week and in this closing session. So yes, a question from back here.
Yes, hi, I'm Michael. I'm the founder of ITMO. I'm also, more importantly, the lead advisor to the Coalition for Rainforest Nations, which represents 55 countries, as you should know, so the second biggest bloc at the COP. My question is more about, because we haven't discussed this at this conference, I thought COP29 was, by the way, one of the best ones ever, simply for one good reason. Article 6 was signed, and it took us 9 years to sign Article 6. So now we have an asset class, we have a global carbon market that everybody can use, all Swiss investors, all Swiss banks can do, and yet we're not talking about it. I know it's only 3 weeks old, so I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that it's a new thing. But how can we work, of course, with the Swiss federal government, but more importantly, with Swiss industry and the Swiss finance industry to make them understand what Article 6 is, so that they unleash maybe some billions, if not trillions, into this new global Paris Agreement carbon market. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. That's clearly aimed at you. And I know you are in agreement that we've got an opportunity with this consolidation of a structure around the carbon markets. But you want to just share a little bit more of a reflection on whether this is the big story coming out of Baku?
For us, it was really a key success, absolutely, yes. It's also the last piece of the Paris Agreement we have now finalized. In fact, now the Paris Agreement is really complete. For sure, the work was not totally on hold up to now. We have certain things have been done. For example, on the Swiss side, we have 14 agreements, bilateral agreements with other countries for Article 6.2 reduction projects. I think what our task was also there, what we tried to develop over the time is, on the one hand, it's always a learning process. No, you have to learn how to interact with other countries, how to build up these common partnerships, how to develop the markets, and also how to develop the standards you are setting. And what we have tried also by this example, also in exchange with other countries, to set really high integrity standards. It is clear the market can only work if we can fully respect the standards and ensure that effective reduction is happening. Also in our exchange with other countries, when we have discussions about starting bilateral agreements on that, for sure we get also one message back. No, one negotiator just told me in Baku, said, Felix, happy to discuss, but don't let's discuss cook stoves. So people are interested in technology. It has to be high-tech, it has to be future-oriented, and in particular, negative emission technologies, there's a high potential there. So we are very much committed to contribute that, and I think always, for sure, keeping environmental integrity, but also have social development as part of those projects, as it is foreseen in the Paris Agreement.
Well, thank you very much. We are now out of time, and we really are going to bring this conversation to a close. So please do join me in thanking our panel and our special chair as well for a very stimulating last substantive session. All right, Karen, I want to welcome you back to the stage. A joy to have you here once again, having started us out on Monday. I bring you back, Karen, to the closing of the closing session. And it really is a chance to reflect on all that's been said over the course of the week. I don't think it would make sense for you and I to try to summarize that, but I am interested in your reflections on what you've heard and what impressed you.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan. And once I was thinking about which session I should talk about, but it's so hard to talk about any specific session. I've just gone back to learning, even in this session now again. This morning I was at a circular economy session, and I just learned so much from it. There were a lot of things I hadn't heard before, and I've been in that space for a while. I've been roaming the floors over these 4 days. I've been in fishbowl discussions and workshops, seen the plenaries, and I've been inspired by the energy and the interaction and the exchange and the collaboration I've been seeing across all these in these different rooms and across all the different parties. That's been amazing, and exactly that's the spirit we're trying to create here at Building Bridges. So I'm super satisfied as I sit here in that way, and very much inspired as well. I think, so I started out the week saying, what's our motto? It's share, learn, act. So I think there's been an impressive amount of sharing, definitely this week. We have had a lot of openness and a lot of integrity in that sharing. So people have really shared things where they were being quite bold with what they shared. I mean, it wasn't maybe sometimes not politically correct. It certainly wasn't corporate policy necessarily what they were sharing, but there was an openness to that. And I think that is really important. If we want to create solutions, we need to be also honest about how we acknowledge mistakes, how we acknowledge hurdles, because that's the only way how we can overcome them. And we had nearly 2,500 participants here in person across the whole week. Another 6,000 joined the sessions online, various ones. So that's been an amazing outreach also to really spread and share the combined knowledge. That, in fact, is really due to all of you here, because it's yours, our event organizers. You've put up that agenda. You've put up all these events. You've shared your speakers, your wisdom. And I think that is a strength, the uniqueness of Building Bridges. And I really want to also thank all of you who've put all the effort into creating that program and being here for that.
Can I just push you a little bit further? Because you have highlighted solutions that have been out, but you also mentioned obstacles. And one of the things that I thought really came through in this discussion over the course of the week is that we need to focus not only on the environmental side of the equation, building climate alongside or building nature alongside of climate, but there is a social dimension here as well. And I do think that engaging the Global South, really delivering a just transition that takes account of people, is going to be fundamental to success of the broader desire to get to a sustainable future. And I'm wondering if you could just reflect on that for a moment. I know it's been part of your plan. It does seem to have evolved in terms of the content this year, but I'm wondering what you reflect on that as well.
Yeah, you're quite right. I think what we've seen definitely this week, and we've just heard it here again, I mean, climate, nature integration, biodiversity, they're all one. I mean, that we need to think about this systemically. And that message has totally arrived. This week has been filled with events around that topic. On the social side, though, as you're mentioning, there are various reasons why we need to think much more about how to invest. And not just saying engage with the Global South, invest in the Global South. We need to move money there. And there are a lot of reasons why that is the case. And even just from a purely pragmatic point of view, if we think about our value chains, how we want to make that transition to renewable energy, a lot of the minerals, a lot of the, the sources are in the Global South. If we don't invest in the Global South and how to mine, how to get those resources in a sustainable way, very pragmatically, we are not going to transition. So that's already one very practical element. And then some of the largest carbon sinks, some of the largest sources of biodiversity. We talked about the Amazon and Brazil, and by the way, the Amazon is also in different other Latin American countries on top of that. The Congo, rainforest in Indonesia. I mean, we talk about the Global South. This is where we find the carbon sinks, plus the 8% in the ocean, as I just did another learning here from Stier just a few minutes ago. Then there's the concept of just transition. We are talking about enabling countries who were not even the source of the climate crisis. They're not at the source of it, but they're suffering mostly from it. And supporting those countries also to transition and to risk mitigate on the climate side without losing the economic opportunities, because we can't just stand still, we need to enable both. So definitely that support is needed. But I don't want to just relate just transition to climate, because it's not just related to climate. I think we cannot afford to forget social cohesion generally. There are a lot of other social elements, and just transition always sounds like it's only related to climate, maybe now biodiversity. But we're talking about health equity, we're talking about access to education, we're talking about economic opportunities. And we should not forget, even though those are not directly related to the climate crisis, we cannot forget about those elements as well. And we've seen that more in the program this week, but I think it's something that we need to put maybe even a renewed focus or an additional focus on, so it doesn't get lost in the focus on the ecological side in a way.
Well, I think we have come to the end of the session that we are hoping to have closed this out with a signal of the path forward, reflecting on what we learned over the course of the week, recognizing there's much to do. But I guess at this point, Karen, I want to invite you to close not only the session, but the entire week-long program of Building Bridges. Yeah. And I think we've learned a lot, all of us. One of the joys of coming is to find that even on topics that you think you know a fair bit about, someone brings new ideas, new perspectives, new frameworks, and it does allow you to bridge from your own thinking onto a broader view. But with that, it is the moment to bring the entire program to a close.
So I have two things. I'll bring it to a close, but before I do that, I have another challenge, which is I talked about learning, sharing. The last one is really acting. 2025 is for you to take action. There's been a lot of learning, sharing these last 4 days. And we know we are facing headwinds, but we cannot just continue our activity. We cannot just take action, but we also need to talk about it. We need to be vocal. We heard that politics, regulators need the support. Corporates need to speak out. They need to support that, that drive for success in negotiations. And just quoting Mary Robinson, what she said earlier this week, step up meaningfully, step up intentionally. There are millions of us around the world on the right side of these issues. There are a lot of people in this room. We had 8,500 people in this week listening to different things. We can take action and we can be forceful and we need to be vocal about it. Not shy away from speaking the truth and speaking what is really necessary. So I think we've our work cut out, but let's give it a break. So I definitely will be happy to close the session. That we've been very happy also to welcome UNEP FI around this. And I want to put out some thanks. You'll have to bear with me for a bit. There have been a lot of people involved here to make this happen. Thank you, Ambassador Wertli, to making it, after such intense travel, still be here with us for the closing. All the other amazing fellow speakers today, but also throughout the whole week. Our event organizers who contributed to this program, our founding partners who made it possible that we're here. And then basically the amazing team around here, volunteers, rapporteurs, the Publicis Live team, which has put everything here in place. And I do want to say a big thank you to my Building Bridges team that has made this possible. And now, I think let's take a break, let's get some cocktails, and let's close this week. Thank you very much.
Well done.
Thank you.
Okay.